Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of violence and gun violence, loss of a child, grief and bereavement, trauma, PTSD, courtroom and justice system failures, early victimization, threats of sexual assault, infertility, interracial adoption challenges, and emotional and mental health struggles. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion.
Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I have Rhonda Parker Taylor with me today. Welcome, Rhonda.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here and really try to engage in unfiltered storytelling. What a wonderful way to spend our Sunday, reflecting and really doing the power of telling a story that's authentic and hopefully resonates with everybody out there that's listening. So all of you out there, let's hope that we have a good story for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Rhonda is an American writer, entrepreneur, and academic researcher, and she has quite the story to tell us just of her own life story, and then she will give us an update on where she is now. I'm going to let you take the reins, Rhonda. Wherever you want to start in your journey, I know very little about it, just scratch the surface of what you've told me. So go ahead and start wherever you feel comfortable, and we'll go from there.
Love to introduce myself to people. Thank you for the introduction that you gave there. It did scratch the surface for people. My story is one that I think most people can relate to because life isn't just a straight path or a journey that you know where you want to go and you stay on that journey. And then it just ends up being the journey that you were intended to be. For me, at least, life was about learning through experience, setting goals, aspirations, taking on challenges, and sometimes having connections that were what I call a seasonal connection.
Mm-hmm.
And people are probably thinking, what do you mean by seasonal connection? Everybody has an intended purpose that we meet. It could be someone in the grocery store. It could be somebody that you meet at work, and it may be a lifetime partner or a family member that's there for the whole duration of your life. But a season means that there's always a beginning, a middle, and an end. Mm-hmm. Some of those triumphs you get to see together, and you have a safe space for sharing your life. And in other, like in this environment of a podcast, and in other cases, that season is shorter and maybe you share, but you have to overcome challenges together. For me, that was me. And that's been my experience with almost anybody that I've come out of isolation at some point and connected with. So you come out of the cocoon at birth. I was born in Noblesville, Indiana. So that has defined me as a Midwesterner, which means my values, my culture is there. And that's how my authentic communication is a big piece. And when I was in college, I had a professor one time that said, you are smarter than you sound. And I had to think, what does that mean? Yeah. People sometimes put these little tidbits out there that can either throw you back or make you come forward into who you really are. And I really had to think about that. What does he mean by I'm smarter than I sound? And I had to think about it all my life. I never put myself as smart. I was
Oh.
social. I was the mediocre. I didn't want to challenge people in some kind of competitive way, which also meant that I didn't do necessarily in my elementary through my high school years. I was defined as the mediocre, the one that wouldn't necessarily thrive. There may have even been a teacher or two that said, you're not the same as some of your siblings. And I had to really overcome what that did to my psyche.
Yeah.
And I was in an enriched academic environment. And it took one teacher in the end of that journey that said, I'm going to tutor you. I'm going to help. And that teacher, Mrs. Donnelly, sat on her floor in the summer to make sure that I was going to pass all my proficiency tests to be able to graduate. And it took that one person. So I'm a person that believes in the power of mentoring and people helping. And that, yes, we should let people have their own autonomy, but we have to lead with empathy and compassion because of that one teacher.
Mm.
And so I graduated, got my bachelor's, my master's, and my doctorate, all because one person made that whole trajectory. And hopefully I'm doing the same in my consulting. And that is to allow people to be vulnerable to where they can actually learn. Because if you look at where their weaknesses are, you realize the real life journey, which is what your podcast is all about.
Yeah.
Life journey. What people didn't know about that young girl is her first victimization was at 14. Her first stalking incident was at 16. The graduation was an escape to run to another state. And so I left in this crumbled state only to come back with resilience and power of a woman that had lived and experienced. And I'm sure there are many people out there in the audience that could say, but the real story is the victimization. The real story is the violence that you witnessed later. But I'm here to say that the real story is the raw resilience. Because as you get to that, you realize that every single struggle, whether it was my learning challenges when I was younger, has something with it that has a strength that awaits. So if you take that challenge and say, wait a minute, what's going to happen? How am I going to handle this? Then you can turn around and you can see the strengths. So what I can say is, yes, I had experiences that were negative in life. But at the same time, I learned that no matter what, I could stand up in a court and say, yes, this is the person that did this to me. I learned what a voice was. And sometimes you don't realize what that voice is.
Yeah.
And then I go on to my life. I'm successful. I'm working hard. And then I realized there was something missing. Have you ever done that? Have you ever really gone and you think, oh, I made it. I'm doing well in business. And then you're like, wow, something's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think that people who are goal oriented and always working towards something, when you finally reach that goal, there's always got to be the next thing, right? So you're like, even if you achieve all of your goals, you're like, okay, I did it. Oh, now what?
And that missing was I wanted more of a community.
Okay.
I really wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be like that teacher. So I started working in a community project, and we started overlooking the legal system, making sure that things were being equal. And of course, that never was the outcome that we saw. Everybody's a loser in the legal system, even the judge, because they've lost their innocence. They've lost their ability to believe in people sometimes. And we started a community project where we would provide safe spaces for the youth. And we had people coming in and out. And the wonderful place about the location in Indianapolis was it was right at 33rd and Meridian, which which is St. Richard's Episcopal Church and Trinity Episcopal Church and St. Richard's schools. So it had the most elite students. And then you also could go 2 blocks, and it was the lowest level of poverty there too. And we broke the district up into 3 to 6 blocks. And I had Talbot, Washington, and Delaware Street. And we would bring kids in for basketball, and we would do lock-ins and teach them life skills, but also how to have fun in a good environment. And that's where I met one of the most miraculous group of people that I'd ever met in my life, that fulfilled and soared my soul. And it was because they had a mutual goal of making it a great area.
Yeah.
And in that, we had met several people that are like, hey, would you mind taking my child and providing them a better outcome? And we knew they were going to be okay. And so that was never an issue. But then there was one child, and that child kept calling, and he'd go play basketball with my husband, and we would do other events with him, and he would come to the youth group, and the mother was wonderful. And then one day we called, and there was no answer.
Oh.
And then sent a message to the mother. Was he going to be coming to basketball? And she said, no, he's got a broken hand, and he was athletic. And how did he break his hand? He'd gotten into a fight at school. And in doing that, she was fearful of sending him back to the school because a gang in the fight, defending himself, he broke someone that was in a gang's nose.
Oh, boy.
The hand that he broke. And we talked about it for a little while, and we made a decision. Bring him to us, and we will enroll him in a school, because we were in the suburbs, where he's not going to have that fear. And we became that day we became the permanent guardian. And it was, to some might say, how could you do this, or how could the mother do this? And it was a mutual agreement.
Yeah.
It was the most selfless act that a woman could make.
Yeah.
Of course, she wanted her son with her.
Yeah.
But she also wanted her son to thrive.
Yeah.
And so she took that opportunity to provide what had never been provided to me, which was a son.
So can I ask you, were you unable to have your own children?
That is correct. For a variety of reasons, yes. So I had no children of my own. And so this lovely, rambunctious, and if I were, his children have asked me to this day, what was he like at this age? And I would say he was a gladiator. And they said, gladiator? What do you mean by gladiator? Gladiator, because he had a strong heart for love of people he knew, and he was willing to fight for that. And they're like, oh, wow, we didn't know this. And he was a good athlete. And we got him all the way through. We raised him completely together. She stayed part of his life, but he was in our home, and got him all the way through high school, got him enrolled in college playing football.
How old was he when you guys got him?
He was 14.
Okay. Okay. So he was already into his teen years and stuff at that point.
And he had his own personality. We would say he was like a Reggie Miller football player. So imagine all that testosterone, trash talk, all that together. And we got him, and he went to a small community college to play football. And then our world started to change. He had his first baby, his second, and then his third. And he had taken on 2 jobs. One was a bouncer for a bar, and the other was Penn Station. And we'd been talking. It was time for him to get out of being a bouncer.
Quick question. I want to back you up a little bit. Can you talk a little bit really quick about what it was like to co-parent with his mom? Because I think that people listening probably are like, Whoa, how does this situation seem so unique? So I just would love for you to speak to that really quick.
Love to talk about. First of all, we're from two very different cultures. He was African American, so she was African, and Mama was. And me being white, that had its own challenges. The first time that I fed him, for instance, I made a dinner and I think it might have been lasagna. And he looked at his, what's this? And I said, lasagna. And I said, what do you normally eat? And he's greens and cornbread.
Oh.
I'm like, okay, I can do that tomorrow. And you try this today. And so then the next day I thought I had greens and cornbread. I went and got the store bought.
Okay.
And made it like we would green bean can, and he looked at it and said, what's this? And I'm like, you said you wanted greens and corn. No, you fry your cornbread and you do this. So I had to call mom and grandma and say, okay, how do you make your greens? Anybody out there that's ever made greens, there's a whole process. If you don't get them cleaned correctly, you're going to be gritty and it's going to taste like an oyster.
Oh gosh.
So you have to do them. So we go through this development even within ourselves, learn and bridge cultures. Same thing. He'd get mouthy, upset at maybe mom for something that she didn't want to provide or couldn't provide at that time. And he'd get a little mouthy and say, he had a mother, it didn't matter. And then she would have to come and he would tell me what he had said. And I'm like, no. That's not the way this goes. We'd have to say, this is where you become a man. Wrong. No matter what happens when that door opens, the raw feelings that you have created with your words mattered.
Yeah.
And sure enough, an upset mom came, and then he had to address it like a man. So this whole process was not only educational for me, but also educational and bridged to cultures that normally may not have even been together.
Yeah.
And it taught me from reflection the true meaning of love, unconditional love. People make mistakes. People say hurtful things. People don't always do the right things. All of these things. And in that, you still work it out to be a family.
Yeah.
And so anybody's out there in the world, maybe you're thinking about adopting, or maybe you're not even sure how to handle your own child, or whatever it might be. Always remember the center is hope and understanding. And the hope and the goal in this case was to graduate a young man that the ecosystem around him had fallen apart and it was no longer safe for him to be there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because a lot of people adopt kids and don't have much contact with the biological mother. So it sounds like you guys, whenever you had a problem with him or whatever, she would get involved too, and maybe vice versa. And I think that's so interesting that you guys were able to do that. I think that's really amazing of you.
And perfect. And that's the main thing in this scenario. There's scenarios that I made mistakes. She made mistakes. He made mistakes. My husband made mistakes. All of us made mistakes.
Parenting is not an easy thing. So but it's nice that you guys could tag team a little bit. I think a lot of parents out there, even adoptive parents, don't, like I said, they don't have the previous parents, so it's all on them. So I think it's cool you guys had that. I also know my knowledge of adoption is a lot of the times if you are adopting from a different culture, they a lot of the times make you do classes and stuff like that to bridge that gap between the cult. If you are a white family taking in a black kid, and I'm sure vice versa, they give you a little bit of counseling and knowledge and stuff like that in order to handle. And I've actually even read stories of families having to move to different places too, if that's the case, just to make everything a lot less complicated.
Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radiantresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon.
We did not move, but we did have issues.
Yeah.
And because the community we lived in was predominantly white.
Okay.
Him being an athlete helped, but it also hurt because he didn't know how to navigate humility and would get mouthy sometimes, like a Reggie Miller. And immediately that would provoke fear of the stereotype of what could happen.
Yeah.
So we did have issues that we had to address constantly. And I would continually say to people in considering this is to consider what that marriage looks like in adoption, because you have to consider the community too and how they're going to handle the child. What was beautiful about him, though, is that gladiator spirit. He didn't care if you're white, black, Mexican, Chinese, purple, green, whatever it might be, because if you were his friend, you were his companion. And that helped tremendously in bridging some of that. But yes, there has to be honest conversations. You have to find the ability to get inner strength in not only the child, but the relationships that are there.
Yeah.
Till today, and we didn't get to the part that of he's no longer with us from that gladiator personality.
Okay, so should we move forward then with that? You were saying you guys were trying to convince him to not be a bouncer anymore.
Exactly. And of course, at that young age, you love that environment. There's status in being the bouncer, the person that can get people in the club, the women, the music, the loudness. But one night he was working and I hadn't heard from him. And I think to this day, that was my premonition, because I called him and I said, if I don't hear from you, I'm going to show up at that bar and I'm going to embarrass you.
Yeah.
And I'm close and I'm bringing my belt. And if you make a decision here, we're going to have it out right there. And of course, I never did. But I think that was a premonition, because the next day there was a knock at the door. I was sitting on my couch. I can see it today. And when I opened the door, it was a police officer. And what had happened the night before is he and the security team had put out some people that had been fighting. They opened the door at last call. One of the young men was there and shot everybody in the security team.
Oh my gosh.
And the police is telling me what happened. And all I can remember is it's almost like the Peanuts commercial, the teacher talking, as I saw a little tiny settling in the foundation of the house at the ceiling level, a little tiny crack. And my mind followed it, and it seemed like it was a whole mile. And I'd never even noticed the crack before. And in my mind, I knew there was just a choice: insanity or reach your sanity. And I said to myself as I reached the top, it's going to be okay. And I turned silent. And the officer left, and then the girlfriend and baby mama came in, and then she left. And I turned so childlike in my mind that I knew there were things that had to be done, people that needed to be contacted, calls that needed to be made. And
How
life,
old was he?
he was 29 at that point.
Okay.
Life was never going to be okay again, the same again. I knew that.
Yeah.
And I went to the cartoons that when you're a kid, Frosty the Snowman, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the song that's put one foot in front of the other. And then immediately I started moving. And so anybody that's out there and needs to break that isolation, that wants to look at you where you're vulnerable and build some resilience, turning the struggles into your own strength, what I have to say is you will rise. It will get better, never go away. And know that finding the strength is also knowing the story. And that childlike passage was me saying, I will survive this. I will be okay. I will celebrate his human spirit. And we have things we need to do.
Mm.
And in that raw reality of life hurt. And it took me years from that. I had to redefine my whole life after that, not just going from being a mother and caregiver, but also changing my role because now that's separated.
Yeah.
There were kids too, but how do you explain to the kids this whole dynamic? And biological mother was in a position to take the two oldest children, and then the mother of the third was able to do that. And I needed to give them that space.
Mm.
So I became alone in this.
That's really tough, not being the biological mother in that sense, I'm sure, because I'm sure you had a relationship with those kids too.
Right.
You still had a relationship with him too. So I can imagine that being another loss on top of it.
And I would show up for the events. And today we still have a relationship. That's the beauty.
Yeah.
The beauty and the gold lining of it is that when you have unconditional loves, you can go beyond whatever the domino effect of trauma is. But you have to choose it.
Yeah.
You can show up to the events, you can start bridging, and you have to do your own healing
Yeah.
in this. And we all then have to decide. And when we hit those crossroads, which is what brought me to where I am today, I write fiction, I do academic work, I research topics that help people heal.
Mm.
And I mentor. I was at the time of all of this, I was a campus director for a college.
Okay.
But I couldn't go back to that age group.
Mm.
It was
Yeah.
painful to work with each individual daily. And so trauma does have an effect on a person's life where they may have to redefine it.
Yeah.
They may have to go back and look at their story and see how they can help others or how they can even help themselves.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you're healing through the vulnerability that you feel, and you build a community. There is one particular church in a neighborhood I would never normally go to that was always open. And Pastor Yankee and all of the people in this church, I would literally just pull into the parking lot, and I might have been a mess, tears down my eyes. They were laying hands on me. They were praying with me. They were putting me to work. And there was probably only 25 to 50 people. It was a very small church. Nobody would even probably have ever seen it.
Yeah.
But they were my rock during that. Same thing. It could have been different individuals, because when you're in that healing and the beginning of the story, you can't really normally lean on your family. They've got work. They've got their own world.
Yeah.
They have to feed their kids. So you have to turn your loss into a new mission to heal yourself and find the resources that will help you turn that loss into a mission. And for me, that mission was, I want to story tell. I want people to realize that there are steps to making you whole again.
Mm.
And sometimes people aren't ready.
Yeah, I'm sure that takes a while too, because I'm sure losing a child, you just feel completely broken inside, and I can't even imagine. It's got to take some time probably to get to that point. You probably just feel empty for a long time.
And you go through the anger, the empty, the
Yeah.
where do I fit in the world anymore?
Mm.
And there is a term for people that have lost people to murder, and
Mm.
that's the domino effect. It changes your brain. We started out talking about how I had experienced my own trauma young. Then now you have added trauma witnesses that witnessed through somebody else. There was a couple of young girls that were killed in the Indiana area recently, the Delphi murders. And it took 8 years before they went to court.
Oh
And
my goodness.
for our case, 5 years, and the guy got off.
Really?
Yes,
He
because
shot all those people and he got off.
they could not prove that the bullet was from his gun, because the only surviving bullet was in one of the people's body that could not be removed. And all the witnesses were dead.
That is mind-boggling. I am constantly surprised by our justice system in so many different aspects of it. Even this is a little bit of a tangent, but my sister, when she was young, she got in trouble and had to go through the juvenile system, and that was eye-opening. And then I've got a client at work who's going through a whole thing that is eye-opening to me, of trying to catch this girl who's like a fraud, and it's been 2 years or something of trying to build a case to finally get this girl arrested. And I'm just like, why? And I guess I think in my head that stuff like that happens and justice is served. And that just absolutely, that had to be even more infuriating for you. That person just got away with that.
And how do you explain that? How do you bridge that? And the only thing I can go back to is that childlike, put one foot in front of the other.
That's all you can do in those situations.
Right.
But
Find the light in the darkest moments. And that's one of the things that grows the passion for me to write fiction and then turn around and do self-help books, because what it allows me to do is explore not only the trauma, the dominoes effects, how different people handle different things in different scenarios, but it allows me to look for the turning point in everyone's life, everybody's crossroads, everybody's resilience, everybody's capacity to overcome. And then, like you said, the legal system lets us know. When I wrote Crossroads, that's what I thought I was going to be talking about, is how unjust the legal system is. But then I found out that the characters took over, and they were just as enamored by what was going on, and that their inability to navigate just the different things around them, which caused a whole new set of circumstances in the book. But that's everything. In my case, I said early that my first real victimization was at knife point.
wow. Can you talk
stranger,
about that?
yes, stranger at work taking me and thinking that he was going to either kill me or rape me. But when I said, God help them, immediately in my mind said, tell him you're only 15.
How old were you?
I was 16.
Okay.
But I said, I'm only 15, and he let me go.
Oh, wow.
And he left. So think of this as a education training, as your education. And he left. But then he went around and did this to a bunch of women in Indianapolis, in which I ended up leaving the area, fear that he would come back. But he only got 3 months.
For doing that to all those women?
To me, I was the only one showing up.
To the court.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. 3 months, and then he's out doing it all over again, probably.
And that's exactly what happened. My mom sent me in college news articles.
Oh
So
my gosh.
finding the light in the darkest moments is hard. Yes, you're exactly right. We have to work on our legal system, and healing together, one story at a time, is a part of what we can do as a community, and making pain that purpose. The journey of resilience is something that we should honor, not exploit. Comfort and connections with each other, telling stories where others might be able to say, hey, this happened to me. How did you journal to get through this? And for me, like I said, I create my own world through fiction. Starts out one sentence at a time, one page at a time. I wrote 5 novels, only one of them I've published so far, so the others are coming. But it's empowering lives through that story, which is like your podcast promotes. When you tell stories and bridge between loss and the purpose that it's supposed to bring to you, I realized that I had something I could offer that added value to others. And that is conversation about how not only do you have a resilience in it, how do you thrive? How do you put intentionality back in your life that brings happiness? Someone's going to say, what do you mean? How could you even focus on happiness? I'm still alive.
Yeah.
So I have to bring happiness in my day daily, opening my blinds, looking at the wildlife outside, going for walks, looking at the deer, talking to my husband, spending time with my sister, finding all those little nuggets and golden stories from each other that make us thrive.
I think it's important for knowledge too, right? Knowledge is power. So, just hearing your story with your son makes me more aware of the justice system and how it really is. Like in that too, by sharing stories, we gain more knowledge from that perspective too, because if we're not in it ourselves, it's very hard to understand fully. We can all say, oh my gosh, that was really hard, but I will never fully understand that unless I've gone through it. And so I think that's important too, to have a little bit more empathy and compassion and understanding of certain situations by sharing those stories as well.
Even your own family won't understand. The Christmas after, for instance, we have this big Christmas, we always did. And everybody's happy and sharing gifts and reading "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" to all the kids before they open their presents. And I had to leave. The heartbreak was too hard, but how I didn't want to steal that from the children and the people. So we also, as the injured ones, have to realize how we impact others and have grace for ourselves, compassion for them, and realize they're not there to heal us.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had to face some of those situations myself. I've struggled with infertility for many years. And a couple Christmases ago, one side of my family did this huge Christmas party, and my cousin's girlfriend was pregnant at the time. And it was the first grandbaby of that family. And I just knew that lots of conversation was going to be around her pregnancy, the baby. My aunt and uncle probably had like ultrasound pictures in the fridge. And I was in a place where I had just failed an IVF cycle and I emotionally could not handle it. And so I made the decision for myself to not go, because the other thing I was thinking of too is I didn't want everyone there feeling like they were walking on eggshells around me too. I wanted them to be able to have those conversations, to not have to worry about it, because if I went, then I would also have tried to remove myself from those conversations if they did happen. And I always think that I'm being discreet about it, and everyone always notices. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying, but then that makes it awkward too, right? Because Tanya just like walks out of the room and then everybody knows why. And so I just thought, you know what? I just think for my mental health and for everyone else to enjoy themselves a little bit more, I'm just going to remove myself from this Christmas. And I did. And there were some people that didn't quite understand it in the family, but I felt like I was true to myself. So I had to do that, because sometimes we have to.
You have to set the boundaries. That doesn't mean go home and become so depressed that you can't get out of it, because there are those moments that you will, no matter what your challenge or adversity is, you're going to want to stay in bed because you just don't want to face. Find some joy that gets you out of it. It could be as simple as putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
You're taking your mind off of focusing solely on one item. It could be going for a walk. It could be watching a movie and crying at somebody else's problems. It could be whatever works for you.
Yeah.
That allows you to still feel, but not stay stuck. You don't get to get it stuck in that rut. You have to provide grace for yourself. You can reflect, you can journal, you can bring positive energy back to you, because that's what bridges that loss or that trauma to your own purpose, and building it empowers lives through that power of your story. You don't want to hit it too soon, or you're not ready and you're too raw, and you have to have comfort in the connections that you're creating with it.
Yes. Yes. What would you say to somebody who is maybe currently in the throes of maybe having lost a child and feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel?
Find the resources. There's a great book that a colleague of mine wrote, A Mother's Grief Journey. And it's called The Worst Life Has to Offer. She lost 2 children within months period. Find those people that have the same type of trauma, drama, tears, connecting with them, finding their story, finding what worked for them. For me, it was finding daily routines that kept me moving forward. I found the church on Illinois Street that was the very small community, but it was not the only one. If there was a community open, the Jehovah Witnesses coming to the door, I opened the door, I'm sitting there doing their Bible study with them. It was women that had pain before that could help me. It could be going to some kind of grief counselor. All of those are very good in today's environment too. They have more online stuff that you don't even have to leave your house if you don't want to.
Yeah, I was going to say Facebook groups. I don't know. Sometimes those are good and sometimes they're not, but I feel like there's a lot out there as far as that goes. So you could maybe hopefully find the right one to find some support.
Anything that brings you into that proactive method of dealing with the emotions. And emotional intelligence is one of the topics that I've done a lot of research on. And emotional intelligence is about managing your emotions. They don't go away.
Yeah.
You always have biases. You always have all these different things. But all you have to do is, if you can stop and reflect on why those emotions are coming out of you, the triggers, the causes, the outcomes that you're really wanting, because all of those emotions come from that.
Yeah.
Then you can navigate others' emotions, because they, like you said, in the situation where you're at a party and you're going through your own thing and you're leaving the room, they don't know how to handle the emotions. So you have to manage their emotions for them. Listen to their points of view and navigate. Like if you have to leave the room, you have to leave the room and allow them to express the joy that they're experiencing, or the disappointment or whatever that they may be going through.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me what your book Crossroads is about.
Oh, I would love to. So this is the first one of the series. It's called Crossroads. It's based out of Indianapolis. So it's a crime thriller.
Okay.
On the same kind of genre as a Grisham or Agatha Christie Clue, not so much the King or the Kuntz. It doesn't go into the fantasy at all. It's in reality. It's based on my experience of watching the court systems in Indianapolis, like I had said. So all the sites are real sites in Indianapolis, even though it's fiction. You have the Monument Circle, the city county building, the jail, the Marion County court system. You have the mayor's office, Holiday Park, and the dead bodies found on 38th and Guy and on the railroad tracks. Okay. It's about a young girl that this is where the journaling comes in. This did not happen to me, but it allowed me to explore what if.
Yeah.
It was a 15-year-old girl that stabbed 72 times and found on the railroad
Oh
tracks.
man.
And the main character, Paris Pennington, is a workaholic that gets called to jury duty.
Okay.
So think about the contrast that journaling allows me to explore. Though it's not my life, it's strictly fiction. It allows me to find my own mental health through each character.
Yeah.
So the main character goes and wants to get out of jury duty because she has to work.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how the legal system works. So
And don't we all want to get out of jury duty? Nobody ever wants to do jury duty.
So then you have the perpetrators of the crime that are on trial and, their journey and how they ended up in this situation. You've got the victim's family, you've got the defense, the judge, and then you put them all in one room trying to navigate it in an imperfect system. And then things start happening to the main character, Paris Pennington.
Oh.
People around her start getting sick, people start dying. And you have to figure out why. So it's the game of Clue of why. And it explores 3 primary emotions: anger, fury, and envy.
Okay.
All of them could cause a crime. And Proverbs says anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot. So it explores what each one of those emotions does to the human soul.
Oh man.
Causing the crime and why is it happening? And it's up to IPD to figure out why.
Did you ever think did you always want to write a fiction book or?
No, I would say in reflection, maybe I was being groomed for it, not only because of my own experience, and my challenges with writing and having to have a tutor, but I think that had a lot to do. But if I go back and look at all my younger pictures, I have a book in my hand. And I wouldn't say I was a big novel reader when I was young. I was more like an encyclopedia. I liked the reading about all the different things and seeing the pictures, or maybe I might have liked Carmen because it was the world view, and I lived in a small county, a small community. And so it was always something that really probably they would say was inappropriate for my age group. But that's what I always had in my hand. So I think all along there was that desire, and then one knock after another, whether it would be the tutoring, doing a typo in a big proposal. I all of a sudden started coming up with this idea that I wanted to write a novel and prove that I could do it. And then I started realizing that, hey, this is a good way for me to reflect on life. So each character is out of balance. So if you're a life balance, and when I say life balance, I'm not just talking work and home. I'm talking about the 13 characteristics that are important, like your physical health, your mental health connection, your social connection, your financial health, all of the 13 main characters. There's something wrong with each one of my characters.
Okay.
And in doing that, then afterwards, if you relate to any of them, I do a case study on each one.
Okay.
And this is the Life Balance book that's coming out after Christmas.
Oh, and is that part of the series, or is that a self-help?
It's a self-help.
Okay.
And it helps you, it's a workbook approach of going through each one of those characteristics and that you come out with, and you say, oh, I would like to improve this, and helps you set the goals.
Okay.
I have to do incremental changes, not go on a fad diet that makes you lose 20 pounds in a day that makes you have diabetes by the time you're 40. So it goes through some of those steps. And then in 2025, don't have the date yet, the second one of the fictions will be coming out.
Oh, yay. Amazing. You said you have 5 in the works?
Yes. So I've been journaling them, and finally my sister, my accountability partner, that's something I'm a big believer in. You have to have somebody that's going to push you out of your box. She finally said to me, why you've got all these books? When are you going to do anything with them? So now it's time for me to do something with them.
Nice.
She said, quit being fearful. Let your vulnerability show.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. That's scary. I can totally see where if I wrote something like that, I'd be like, oh, should I put this out in the world? Maybe people aren't going to like it. I don't know. So that's that fear talking.
Exactly. Exactly. It's funny because I've been doing several book signings and I've really gotten to where I love them more than life itself. Just going, talking to people and not only hearing about my book and what they liked about it or didn't like about it, but also the people that didn't read the book, that just everybody that goes into a Barnes and Noble store has a mission and that's their next great escape.
Yeah.
I just love talking to them. I had this, I'm going to call a troll heckler, maybe a fan and just not saying it, but she come from after they had been at one book signing and they were at the second one. And when they were at the counter, the one cousin came over and said, "It sucks."
Oh my gosh.
I had to laugh though. I don't think she really meant it as being mean.
Okay, good.
It was more of just that camaraderie of seeing the people there, and I thought to myself years ago I wouldn't have been ready for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool that so you keep mentioning journaling. So when you journal, you're journaling ideas for your books. So some of it is fiction and some of it is not.
It helps pull it together. So my philosophy is 1 page a day and a novel's done in a year.
Okay.
And that leaves you 100 pages that can be sliced out because most novels aren't 365 pages.
Yeah.
And I might, like one time I was talking about Golden Corral's food because the officer was there and my beta reader read it and said, nobody likes food that much. I must have been hungry. I was journaling about food and it gives me space. Each character, I look through what's called a medical soap note.
Okay.
Which in the medical community, when you go in, they know your whole history. They know your chief complaints. They know whether you broke your ankle when you were 5. They know everything about you. Then you come in and say, I have a cold. And then they write down what they see. They dressed inappropriately for the weather. They says that they have a cough and that they have a cold, but maybe the wheezing is more of an emphysema wheeze or whatever it might be. And then they also do a mental health assessment using the DSM-5. So I do that on every one of the characters.
Okay.
So I may want to explore a particular type of personality then. And then I'll put it in that character in my journaling. Maybe it's been something that I've experienced or I saw, and I have a tendency to be in groups sometimes and create their own story. And they're getting on a plane, and I think they may be going to Canada, but I have them going to the Caribbean in my head. And I create these stories, but it also allows me to, like I said, explore some of my own traumas too. What if I hadn't said I was 15? What could have happened if this had gone further? Or like let's say Billy Nichols is the co-defendant in Crossroads. He's there because he got in the car with his friend. And now he has to decide his crossroads. Is he loyal to the point of putting himself in jail? Mm. Or does he put someone he's known since he was a baby?
Which we face a lot of those decisions throughout life.
Exactly. You could get in the car. It could be a drinking and driving experience. It could be anything where, you could be taking someone to a job interview.
Yeah.
Or someone says, hey, let's go. I need to pick up some medicine at the drugstore. Could you drive me? And they really are after the opioids. Yeah. You don't know until the experience occurs.
Yeah.
So all of us reach crossroads all the time.
Yeah.
The main purpose. Are you aware? Are you scanning at all times?
Yeah.
To know whether your best intentions are in mind.
How many books are there, or do you have planned for that series?
5.
Five.
Each character has their own novel dedicated to them in the room.
Okay, interesting. I love that. So now you also do a little bit of coaching as well?
Yes. My academic coaching is for capstone projects and doctoral dissertations. I get those leads typically through the colleges, different colleges I've worked for. And what we do there is we do the monitoring that they're following all the guidelines for their projects. And then I also do career assessments and individual counseling where we can help you make those transitions when you need to, whether it be just resume writing to, wait a minute, where do I go now? Where are my transferable skills going to be next? And then we do business strategy.
Okay.
Writing oriented.
Okay. Awesome. I love this. What else are you doing? You've got the books, you've got the coaching. Is that it?
That is really all of it. Just trying to enjoy life just like everybody else, muddling through.
Yeah.
And sure that I just like to try to keep life intriguing for myself and for others.
Yeah. You said you're still in touch with your son's family?
Yes, I just talked to the daughter today, and we've got some holiday schemes going on for the rest of them.
Oh, good. That's awesome. Do you still talk to his mom too?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm glad you guys have kept that relationship.
It's more distant than it was, obviously, but every holiday, every main event, we still are in contact.
How many years has it been?
That's a whole nother podcast.
Ah!
2009 was his death. And I lost my mom to breast cancer September 19th, 2004. I lost him September 19th, 2009. I lost my uncle September 19th, 2015. I lost my father September 19th, 20th, 2000.
September is a rough month for you.
Yeah. 19th is one that I try to approach it with joy, that they're all having their own Thanksgiving meal together. My father, we knew he was going to pass September 19th, and we reminded him because his mind was still intact. He had emphysema and he didn't want a vent. And we reminded him it was the same day as my mother. And he said, no, let her have her day. And do it at midnight to 12:01.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. You certainly have lived through some things.
Point in the whole journey for anybody out there listening. This is not about testing just the resilience and adaptability. It's testing how you view life.
Yeah.
There is a beginning, a middle, and an ending for everybody. And that journey is the beauty. And no matter what that journey is for us, if we can take that pain and make it the purpose and create a new mission that helps others face everybody that I've ever loved, I was there holding their hand when they passed, except for my son. I didn't get that opportunity. And I think that's because God knew that it would be too hard.
That would be hard. Yeah.
And if you can teach not only ourselves, but others how to handle those milestones.
Yeah.
And the disappointments and the heartache of what those disappointments means we can find that new mission.
Yeah.
And we can create it together, make it a better place. And wouldn't it be great if we could open life with kindness every day?
Yes.
And lean into the evening with compassion?
I love that. That's a great thing to end on. I usually ask all my people, what final parting words do you have? But I think you just did a really good job with what you just said. So I think that's amazing. And you are such a beautiful soul. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of that. And I know it's not an easy thing to relive some of that stuff. So thank you for chatting about it with me and sharing the story. I will link all the ways to get a hold of you in the show notes. So if anybody wants your book, when does your next book come out?
The Life Balance book they haven't given me the exact date, but it should be at January. So by the time yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So we'll link everything, and I'm sure you get it just everywhere books are sold.
Definitely.
Awesome.
On Barnes and Noble. If there's any available when this comes out still in the Indiana area, I've gone into all the stores and signed all the copies so that for their holiday gift giving. But I don't know how many they have left. I know they were low on stock.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for everything you've done and for sharing your story and coming on here. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.